Emma thought the hardest part would be watching the man who betrayed her marry the best friend who betrayed her with him. So when she accepted the wedding invitation, she asked her boss, Daniel, to come with her for one reason: to stand beside her as a friend. But just before they walked through the doors, Emma saw her ex waiting inside, and without thinking, reached for Daniel's hand. What happened during that wedding would force Emma to face a truth she had been avoiding for 2 years. Sometimes the person you call just a friend is the one who has been quietly showing you what love should have felt like all along. Before we begin, subscribe to the channel and leave a like if you enjoy emotional stories about love, second chances, and the choices that can change everything. Now let's begin. Daniel Hayes never asked Emma why she came to the office earlier than everyone else. He had simply noticed one morning that by 8:25 her computer was already on, her hair was pulled into a loose ponytail, and another project was open across her screen, even though the workday officially began at 9. A week later, a cup of coffee appeared at the edge of her desk. No note. Emma looked up and saw Daniel standing near the door to his office. "Is this for me?" "No. I just thought your desk needed a coffee cup for decoration." She smiled. "Very design-oriented of you." "I own the studio. I'm allowed." After that, coffee appeared on her desk a few times a week. Not every morning. That would have turned it into a habit, and habits eventually demanded explanations. But often enough for Emma to notice. She noticed plenty of other things, too. For example, Daniel never gave her the standard great job. Once, she spent nearly a week redesigning a small countryside hotel. The client wanted the place to feel more luxurious and kept asking for more expensive details, while Emma did the opposite. She removed half the decoration and opened the interior toward the enormous windows overlooking the garden. During the presentation, the client remained silent for a long time. Then he approved everything. When the conference room finally emptied, Daniel stayed behind beside her laptop. "You removed almost everything he asked for." Because he wasn't asking for what he actually needed. Daniel studied the rendering once more. "That's exactly why I trusted you with this." Then he walked away. Strangely, those were the words she remembered. Emma remembered far too many things about him. She knew that after a difficult meeting, Daniel rolled his sleeves slightly higher over his forearms. That when he was angry, his voice became quieter rather than louder. That he could forget to eat if he spent the entire day moving between meetings. Sometimes, after an especially exhausting one, she would walk into his office without saying anything and leave a coffee on his desk. Once, Daniel looked at the cup and then at her. "Do I look that bad?" "Worse. Thanks for the support. Anytime." People noticed them. Of course they did. "Whitmore," one of her co-workers said one afternoon after Daniel left the room, "you do realize that terrifying Mr. Hayes speaks like a normal human being to approximately 3 people?" Emma didn't even look up from her drawings. "And?" "2 of them are clients." "Then I guess I'm lucky." "Or he is." Emma gave her co-worker a warning look. "He's my boss." "Of course." "And my friend." "Much more convincing." Emma laughed with everyone else, but afterward, she stared at her screen for far too long without reading a single line. Friend. It was a safe word, and Emma had learned to value safety 2 years ago. She had already made the mistake of allowing a man to occupy too much space in her life. Ryan hadn't simply been someone she loved. At some point, without her noticing, he had become part of every plan she made. The apartment was theirs, vacations were theirs, the future was theirs. And Madison had been the person Emma told about that future, her best friend. So when everything collapsed, Emma lost 2 people at once. Since then, she had made herself a promise. Never again would she confuse closeness with dependence. and she certainly wouldn't build her life around another man. Even if being around him somehow made everything feel a little quieter. The cream-colored envelope appeared on her desk on Thursday. At first, Emma assumed it was another invitation to some client event. She kept talking on the phone as she opened it. "Yes, send me the final measurements by 5, otherwise we won't have time to—" She stopped. 2 names were printed in gold lettering across the thick white card. Ryan Bennett and Madison Clark. Emma stopped hearing the voice on the phone. 2 years. She hadn't seen those names beside each other in 2 years. For a moment, another evening flashed through her mind. Ryan's phone on the kitchen counter. A message. Madison's name. And a few lines that had been enough to end 4 years of a relationship in a matter of minutes. The worst part hadn't even been discovering that they had been seeing each other behind her back. The worst part was remembering everything that had happened before she knew. Madison sitting across from her in a cafe, listening while Emma talked about Ryan. Madison asking whether everything between them was okay. Madison hugging her. Ryan coming home afterward and calmly asking how her day had been. They both knew. Emma didn't. After discovering the truth, she simply left. No dramatic confrontation, no desperate need to know every detail. A few months later, she heard that Ryan and Madison had stayed together. Now they were getting married, and they wanted her there to watch. "Emma?" The voice from the phone brought her back into the office. "Sorry. Yes, I'm here." She finished the conversation, set her phone down, and looked at the invitation again. There was a short, handwritten message on the back. "I hope you'll come. I think it's time for all of us to leave the past in the past. Madison." Emma gave a quiet, humorless laugh. Of course. Madison wanted to leave the past in the past. It was probably much easier to walk down the aisle if the woman they had once betrayed was sitting among the guests, smiling, her presence silently saying that everything was fine now. Ryan probably needed the same thing. Not a conversation, not accountability, just proof that Emma wasn't angry anymore. She crushed the envelope in her hand, walked toward the trash can, and stopped. For several seconds, she stared down at it. Why wasn't she going? Because she didn't want to? Or because she was afraid? She didn't like the answer. Slowly, Emma smoothed the envelope between her fingers. If she stayed home simply because she was afraid to see Ryan beside Madison, then even after 2 years, they still had the power to decide which rooms she could enter and which ones she couldn't. No, she wasn't giving them that. "Are you busy Saturday?" Daniel looked up from his laptop. Emma stood in the doorway of his office. He glanced at the clock. "It's Thursday. I'm already concerned." "Why?" "Because normal invitations don't begin with that expression." Emma folded her arms. "What expression?" "The one you usually wear when you're about to tell me a client changed their mind 24 hours before a deadline." She couldn't help smiling. Daniel leaned back in his chair. "Depends on how bad the offer you're about to make is." "A wedding." His eyebrows rose. "Worse than I thought." Emma laughed, but the smile quickly faded. "My ex is getting married?" Daniel stopped joking. "I see." "To my former best friend." The silence changed. Emma told him everything briefly, leaving out the details that no longer mattered. When she finished, Daniel remained quiet for a moment. "And they invited you?" "Yes." Bold. "I'm going." He studied her more carefully. "Is that why you're here?" Emma nodded. "I need someone to come with me." Then, for some reason, she quickly added, "Just as a friend." Something crossed Daniel's face, so faintly that she couldn't read it. "Of course. If you don't want to, that's completely fine." "Emma," she stopped. He didn't ask why she had chosen him. He didn't tell her she needed to show up looking beautiful and happy and make her ex regret losing her. Instead, He asked, "Do you actually want to go?" Emma lowered her eyes. It was the only question she hadn't expected. After a few seconds, she answered, "I want to know if I can walk into that room without needing to prove anything to them." Daniel nodded. "Then I'll go with you." On Saturday, the countryside estate looked almost unreal. White stone, tall windows, green lawns, and music drifting through the open doors. Daniel was waiting beside the car. When Emma appeared, for the first time since he had known her, he didn't immediately find something to say. Her pale yellow satin top caught the evening light softly. The long matching skirt moved around her legs with every step, and her blonde hair, which she almost always wore tied back at the office, fell freely over her shoulders. Emma noticed the way he was looking at her. "What?" "Nothing." "Hayes." A small smile appeared on his face. "You look beautiful." For some reason, the simplicity of those words made her more self-conscious than any elaborate compliment could have. "You don't look too bad yourself." "Not too bad? Don't get used to compliments." They started toward the entrance. The closer they came to the glass doors, the slower Emma walked. Guests moved behind them, waiters, white flowers, and then she saw him, Ryan, blonde hair, blue eyes, a black groom's suit, almost exactly as she remembered him. Madison stood beside him. Her brown hair was pinned up. A white wedding dress surrounded her figure. She said something to Ryan, and he smiled. Emma stopped. 2 years suddenly shrank into the few yards between her and those glass doors. "Emma," Daniel's voice came quietly from beside her. "I'm fine." "No." She turned toward him. His voice remained calm. "You're not, and you don't have to pretend you are." Emma said nothing. "We can leave," he said. "Right now." She looked through the glass again. Ryan, Madison. The life she had once been pushed out of so unexpectedly that, for a long time, she had believed she was the one who had lost. Then Emma looked at the man standing beside her. "No." Daniel nodded and took a step toward the doors. And that was when she reached for his hand. Without thinking. Her fingers slipped between his almost instinctively. Daniel stopped. He looked down, then back at her. Emma suddenly realized what she had done, but she didn't let go. "Is this still just as a friend?" he asked quietly. There was no teasing in his voice, and somehow that made the question far more dangerous. Emma looked at the closed doors in front of them, then at Daniel. And for the first time that evening, she genuinely smiled. "Ask me after the wedding." Daniel's fingers closed a little more firmly around hers. The doors opened, and Emma stepped inside. The room noticed them before Emma was ready to be noticed. It happened quietly at first. A few heads turned near the entrance. A conversation paused. Someone Emma vaguely recognized from Ryan's old circle glanced at her, then at Daniel, then down at their joined hands. Emma felt it immediately, that old unpleasant awareness of being observed. 2 years ago, it would have made her let go. Now, strangely, she held on. Daniel didn't tighten his grip or draw her closer for effect. He simply walked beside her as though there was nothing unusual about the fact that her hand was in his. That steadiness helped more than she wanted to admit. Across the room, Ryan saw them. Emma knew the exact moment it happened. His expression barely changed, but his attention did. His eyes landed on her first, then moved to Daniel, tall, broad-shouldered. Dark hair slightly waved back from his face. The light-colored suit made him stand out among the darker jackets around the room. Ryan looked down at their hands. Only for a second, but Emma saw it. And somehow, that second told her more than any reaction could have. Madison noticed them next. She looked beautiful. Emma hated that some small, wounded part of her had expected not to think so. Madison's brown hair was pinned elegantly behind her head, and the white dress was simple rather than extravagant. For one strange moment, Emma remembered helping her choose dresses for other people's weddings years ago. Then Madison was walking toward them. Her smile was careful, not false exactly, just rehearsed. Emma, Madison. They stood facing each other for a moment, with years of unfinished things between two perfectly polite words. I wasn't sure you'd come. Emma gave a small smile. Neither was I. Madison's eyes shifted toward Daniel. And this is... Emma opened her mouth. My boss. The answer was already there. Safe, accurate, easy. But for some reason, she didn't say it. This is Daniel. She glanced at him. We came together. Something subtle changed in Daniel's expression. Madison noticed it too. I'm glad you came, she said after a brief pause. Emma wasn't sure whether she meant both of them. Maybe Madison wasn't sure either. By dinner, Emma had begun to understand something she hadn't expected. Ryan and Madison were not unhappy, but they were not effortless either. That surprised her. For 2 years, she had unconsciously imagined their relationship as a conclusion. They had chosen each other, therefore they must have been certain. They had hurt her for this. Therefore, it must have been worth it. It was a cruel kind of logic, but pain often made its own rules. Now she saw something different. Ryan checked Madison's expression whenever he spoke too long with another guest. Madison noticed every time his attention drifted toward Emma's side of the room. They smiled at the right moments, touched each other at the right moments. But there was vigilance beneath it. Tiny movements, quick looks, a hand held half a second too tightly. Emma watched them from across the table and suddenly felt embarrassed by how much power she had given them in her memory. She had spent so long believing that Madison must have possessed something she didn't. Something more desirable, more exciting, more worth choosing. But betrayal had never been a measurement of Emma's value. It had only been a measurement of their choices. The realization came without drama, no sudden rush of triumph, just a quiet loosening inside her chest. For the first time, Madison wasn't the woman who had won. Ryan wasn't the man Emma had lost. They were simply two flawed people sitting at the center of their own complicated life, and Emma was no longer outside of it, wishing to be let back in. She didn't want in. That was the difference. Ryan found her near the terrace doors after dinner. Can we talk? Emma looked past him toward the room. Daniel was speaking to an older man near the bar. She hesitated, then nodded. 5 minutes. Ryan led her toward a quieter hallway. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Up close, he looked familiar in a way that felt almost unsettling. Not because she missed him, because once she had known every version of his face. Now he seemed like someone she used to study for an exam she no longer needed to take. I'm glad you came, Ryan said. So everyone keeps telling me. He gave a nervous laugh. Emma didn't. Ryan looked down. I was the one who wanted to invite you. I assumed Madison did. She did too, but I insisted. Emma waited. Why? He struggled with the answer longer than she expected. I don't know, I guess. I wanted to know you were okay. Emma's expression changed slightly. Ryan noticed. That sounded worse out loud. It did. He exhaled. I wanted to know you didn't hate me anymore. There it was. Not concern. Permission. Emma looked at him for a long moment. You invited me to your wedding because you wanted me to make you feel better about what happened? No, that's not... It's partly that. Ryan didn't deny it. His gaze moved briefly toward the ballroom, toward Daniel, then back to her. When I saw you walk in with him, he stopped. Emma already disliked where the sentence was going. Ryan continued anyway. I don't know. I looked at you, and you were holding his hand, and for the first time I thought... He gave a small, almost ashamed smile. that I really lost you." Emma stared at him. 2 years ago, those words might have shattered her. A year ago, they might have satisfied her. Tonight, they only made her tired. "Ryan," he looked at her. "You didn't lose me today." The softness vanished from her voice, but not the calm. "You lost me 2 years ago." Ryan said nothing. Emma held his gaze. "You just saw it for the first time today." The silence between them no longer hurt. That surprised her most. She stepped back. "I hope you and Madison are happy." Ryan's face tightened slightly. Emma meant it, not generously, not bitterly, simply honestly. Then she returned to the ballroom. Daniel was different when she came back. Most people wouldn't have noticed. Emma did. His smile was still polite, his posture relaxed, his voice even. Too even. She approached him near the edge of the dance floor. "Everything okay?" Of course. That answer alone told her it wasn't. Emma tilted her head. "You do realize I know what of course means when you say it like that." Daniel looked at her. "What do you want me to say?" "The truth would be refreshing." His jaw shifted slightly. Before he could answer, the music changed. A slower song began. Couples started moving toward the dance floor. Emma looked at them, then back at Daniel. "Dance with me." His eyebrows lifted. "As a friend?" She almost laughed. "You've asked that too many times today." Still no answer. Emma held out her hand. "That's because you keep asking at inconvenient moments." He looked at her hand for a second before taking it. Daniel's hand settled carefully at her waist. Not low, not possessive. Careful. Emma noticed that too. Of course she did. They moved slowly with the music. For a few moments, neither spoke. The ballroom seemed strangely distant despite being full of people. Emma looked up at him. "You're still angry?" "I'm not angry." "Jealous?" Daniel gave her a look. "That's a dangerous question to ask your boss. Then answer as my friend." He almost smiled. Almost. Then his expression became serious. "That's the problem." Emma stopped moving for half a beat. Daniel's hand steadied her. "What problem?" He looked away briefly, as though deciding whether he had already gone too far. Then he looked back at her. "I didn't come tonight only because you needed someone." Emma's pulse changed. She didn't speak. Daniel continued quietly. "I came because it was you." The music kept playing around them. Emma could hear it, but the words had become difficult to process. "Daniel? I've liked you for a long time." He said it without performance. No dramatic pause, no expectation in his eyes. That made it more intimate. Emma's fingers tightened slightly against his shoulder. "How long?" "Long enough to know I shouldn't have said anything while you worked directly for me." She frowned. "You thought I couldn't handle it?" "No." His answer was immediate. "I thought you shouldn't have to." Emma stared at him. Daniel lowered his voice. "I'm your boss. If I told you how I felt, even politely, you'd still have to walk into the office the next morning and wonder whether saying no would change something. Your projects, your position, the way I treated you. It wouldn't. You know that now." He paused. "You couldn't have known it then." Emma felt something inside her shift. For 2 years, she had interpreted his restraint as uncertainty, sometimes even indifference. She had never considered that it might have been deliberate, that the distance itself had been a form of care. "I didn't want you to feel cornered," Daniel said. "And I definitely didn't want to become another man in your life who decided what you were supposed to be comfortable with." The words landed quietly, painfully, because Emma understood exactly who he was not naming. Ryan had crossed boundaries while telling her everything was fine. Daniel had respected boundaries she hadn't even realized he was protecting, and suddenly, All the small moments came back differently. The coffee, the conversations, the way he never touched her unnecessarily, the way he never used kindness to ask for something in return. Emma had spent 2 years telling herself that she felt safe with him because they were only friends. Now she wondered if she had confused the cause with the result. Maybe she felt safe because Daniel had cared enough not to demand anything from her. The song began to end. Neither of them stepped away. Emma looked at him, searching his face. "You really waited all this time?" Daniel's mouth curved faintly. "I was hoping eventually you'd stop calling me your friend." Despite herself, she smiled. Then the music ended. Applause rose around them, but Emma barely heard it, because for the first time that night, Ryan and Madison were no longer the most important people in the room. And that realization frightened her far more than seeing her past ever had. Emma left the ballroom before the next song began. Not dramatically. She didn't run. She simply needed air. The terrace doors opened onto a wide stone balcony overlooking the dark lawn. Strings of warm lights hung between the trees, and somewhere beyond the hedges, water moved quietly in a fountain. For the first time that evening, there was no music directly around her. No guests. No Ryan. No Madison. Just the night. Emma rested both hands on the stone railing and tried to understand what had just happened. Daniel had said he had feelings for her, not casually, not because the wedding had made everyone sentimental, for a long time, and somehow that frightened her more than she expected. The door opened behind her. She knew who it was before he spoke. "I can go back inside." Emma looked over her shoulder. Daniel stood a few steps away. "No." He waited. She gave a tired smile. "I mean, don't go." So he stayed. Not beside her immediately, a little distance away. That small choice nearly broke her composure. Emma looked out over the lawn again. "I felt it too." Daniel said nothing. "The thing between us," she continued, "whatever it is." His expression softened. "I know." She turned. "You know?" "I suspected." That sounds annoyingly confident. "It's a professional weakness." Emma almost laughed. Almost. Then her face changed. "But tonight made everything worse." Daniel frowned slightly. "Worse?" "I don't know what was real and what was reaction." He understood before she finished. Emma looked down at her hands. "What if I took your hand because I saw Ryan?" Daniel stayed silent. She forced herself to continue. "What if some part of me wanted him to see me with someone else? What if I only reached for you because I didn't want to look alone?" The question had been waiting inside her since the entrance. Now that it was spoken aloud, it sounded uglier, more honest. Daniel didn't rush to reassure her. He didn't say it didn't matter. Instead, he looked at her for a long moment and said quietly, "Then I don't want to be the man you choose to forget another one." Emma lifted her eyes. He stepped closer, but not enough to touch her. "I don't want to be revenge, Emma." His voice remained calm. "Or a better-looking answer to Ryan. Or someone you bring into your life because you need the past to see that you're fine." She swallowed. "I wasn't trying to use you." "I know." Daniel's expression softened. "That's why I'm saying this now." The wind moved a strand of her hair across her cheek. Daniel resisted the instinct to brush it away. Emma noticed. Of course she noticed. "If something ever happens between us," he continued, "I want it to happen on some completely ordinary Tuesday morning." Emma stared at him. He smiled faintly. "No Ryan. No Madison in a wedding dress. No room full of people you feel like you have to impress." The smile disappeared. "Just you deciding you want me there." The simplicity of it hurt. because Emma had become so used to measuring love by intensity that she had forgotten there could be dignity in slowness. She looked away. "Why didn't you ever say anything before?" Daniel exhaled quietly. "I told you." "No. You gave me the professional version." He almost smiled. "Fine." He leaned one hand against the railing. "Because you worked for me." Emma waited. "And because it mattered more to me that you could say no without fear than that I heard yes." She went still. Daniel looked directly at her. "I never wanted you wondering whether refusing me would change your job, or whether being kind to me meant you owed me something later." Emma's throat tightened. No grand confession could have affected her as deeply as that. Because Ryan had taught her one version of closeness, the kind where promises could exist beside secrets, where intimacy didn't necessarily mean safety. Daniel had shown her another without ever naming it. He had given her room, and never demanded credit for doing so. Emma looked down. "I think I've been hiding behind the word friend." Daniel didn't interrupt. "Every time something started feeling too important, I called it friendship because friendship felt safer." She gave a small, embarrassed laugh. "I told myself I was being careful." "You were." "No." Emma shook her head. "I was scared." The admission came out softer than she expected. "After Ryan, I decided I'd never let anyone matter enough to hurt me like that again." Daniel's eyes stayed on her. "So I started confusing independence with distance." A silence passed between them. Then Daniel said, "You don't have to solve that tonight." Emma looked at him, and there it was again. No pressure, no demand for an answer, simply because he had confessed first. Before she could respond, the terrace door opened. Madison stepped outside. She stopped the moment she saw them. For a second, all three remained silent. Emma expected defensiveness, maybe apology, maybe one last performance of politeness. Instead, Madison looked tired, not like a bride, just like a woman who had been carrying something badly for too long. "Can I talk to you?" Emma glanced at Daniel. He started to step away. "No," Emma said. Madison looked surprised. Emma faced her. "You can say it here." Madison clasped her hands together. "I owe you an apology." Emma didn't answer. "I know that sounds late." "It is." Madison nodded. "I know." There was no argument in her voice. That made it harder to stay angry. Not impossible, just harder. Madison looked toward the ballroom through the glass. "I told myself I invited you because I wanted to make peace." Emma waited. But that wasn't the whole truth. Madison's eyes returned to hers. "I wanted to see you happy." Emma frowned slightly. Madison continued. "Because if you were happy, then maybe I could believe what I did didn't damage you forever." There it was. Not cruelty, selfishness disguised as closure. Emma understood it immediately. "You wanted me to make you feel forgiven." Madison looked down. "Yes." Emma felt the old pain stir, but it was smaller now, older. It no longer owned the room. "My happiness shouldn't help you forgive yourself." Madison closed her eyes briefly. "I know." "No," Emma said calmly. "I don't think you did." Madison looked at her again. Emma's voice stayed steady. "What happened hurt me, a lot. But what I became after that belongs to me." She paused. "You don't get to use my life as evidence that what you did was okay." Madison's eyes filled, but Emma didn't soften the truth. She didn't sharpen it either. She simply let it stand. "I'm not asking you to hate yourself," Emma added. "I'm asking you to carry your own choices." Madison nodded slowly. For the first time in 2 years, Emma looked at her and didn't see the woman who had taken something from her. She saw a person who had made a selfish decision and had spent years trying to make the consequences easier to live with. That was Madison's burden, not Emma's. Madison whispered, "I'm sorry." Emma looked at her for a long time. Then she nodded once. Not forgiveness, not rejection, just acknowledgement. And somehow, that was enough. Madison went back inside. The terrace door closed behind her. Emma remained still for several seconds. Daniel didn't speak. Then Emma turned toward him. Something in her face had changed. The tension was gone. Not completely, but enough. She took one step closer, then another. Daniel watched her carefully. Emma didn't kiss him. That would have been easy. Too easy. Instead, she reached for his hand. Again. This time, there was no glass door in front of them, no Ryan watching, no Madison, no guests, no one to impress, no one to punish. Daniel looked down at their joined hands, then up at her. Emma smiled softly. "Now I know exactly why I'm doing it." Daniel didn't answer. He just closed his fingers around hers. And for the first time that night, Emma wasn't holding someone's hand because she was afraid to walk forward alone. She was holding it because she wanted him beside her. Monday came with fluorescent lights, unanswered emails, and the quiet cruelty of routine. Emma arrived at the office at 8:27. 2 minutes later than usual. She noticed because she needed something ordinary to think about. Her computer hummed to life. Someone laughed near the copy room. A designer across from her complained about a client who had changed the flooring choice for the 3rd time. Everything looked exactly the same, and yet nothing felt the same. At 8:41, Daniel walked past her desk. For the briefest second, their eyes met. "Morning." "Morning." That was all. No private smile, no reference to the wedding, no hand reaching for hers. Emma told herself she appreciated the normality. By noon, she hated it. Just before lunch, Daniel asked her to come into his office. Emma closed the door behind her and stood across from his desk. For once, neither of them seemed to know where to begin. Daniel finally leaned back in his chair. "Saturday happened." Emma raised an eyebrow. "That is a very romantic opening." He smiled despite himself. "I'm trying not to make this worse." "You're doing an excellent job." His smile faded. Then his voice became more serious. "I meant what I said that night." Emma's expression softened. "So did I." "I know." He paused. "But this is still your workplace, and I'm still the person who approves your projects, reviews your performance, and makes decisions that affect your career." Emma understood before he finished. Daniel continued anyway. "I don't want us to start something while that's true." For 1 second, disappointment moved across her face. He saw it. "This isn't me changing my mind." "I know. I need you to really know." She looked at him. Daniel rested his hands on the desk. "You work too hard for everything you've built here. I don't ever want someone looking at your success and wondering whether you earned it or whether you were sleeping with the person signing your reviews." Emma flinched slightly at the bluntness. Daniel did too. "Sorry." "No." She shook her head. "You're right." And that was the strange thing. It hurt a little, but it also made her trust him more. Even now, when he could finally have what he had wanted for so long, Daniel was still thinking about what it might cost her. Emma gave him a small smile. "So what do we do?" "For now?" He glanced toward the glass wall separating his office from the rest of the studio. "We work." "That sounds painfully mature. I hate it too." She laughed. The tension broke, but not the promise underneath it. Weeks passed, then months. Life did what it always did. It moved forward whether people were ready or not. Emma's hotel project expanded unexpectedly after the client asked the studio to develop 2 additional properties. She was given more responsibility, then more again. The work had started long before the wedding, before Daniel's confession, before anyone could question where it came from. When the company eventually reorganized its design teams, Emma was offered a position in a new independent group under another director. Daniel was not in the room when she received the offer. He had deliberately made sure of that. Emma accepted. Her new desk was on another floor. Her projects no longer needed Daniel's approval. The first morning after the transfer, she found a coffee waiting beside her keyboard. No note. She stared at it for several seconds, then laughed quietly to herself. Some habits, apparently, were allowed to survive. The Tuesday that changed everything was almost aggressively ordinary. No wedding, no music, no old wounds waiting behind glass doors. Just a long day of meetings and rain that had stopped sometime before 5. Emma left the building just after 6. She was halfway down the front steps when she noticed Daniel across the street. He was standing outside the little coffee shop they both used far too often, 2 cups in his hands. Emma stopped. Daniel lifted one of them slightly. She crossed the street. "You know," she said, "most people send a message." I considered it. And? This seemed less efficient. Very unlike you. He handed her the coffee. She took it, still watching him. Daniel slipped one hand into his coat pocket. "Now can I ask?" Emma knew exactly what he meant. Still, she made him say it. "Ask what?" His mouth curved. "Are you free tonight?" She looked at him over the rim of the cup. "As what?" Daniel laughed softly. "Definitely not as a friend." Emma smiled. Not the nervous smile from the wedding entrance. Not the careful smile she had used for years whenever feelings became too close to something real. A different one. She put the coffee in her left hand, then held out her right. Daniel looked at it. For just a moment, he didn't move. "Are you sure?" The question touched her more deeply than she expected. He was still asking, still giving her room to choose. Emma stepped closer. "That night I took your hand because I was afraid to walk in there alone." Daniel's eyes stayed on hers. Emma's fingers remained open between them. "And now?" She smiled. "Now I'm taking it because I want to keep walking with you." Daniel took her hand. No applause followed. No music began at exactly the right moment. No one watching from a window understood that something important had just happened, and that was precisely why it mattered. They started down the street together. 2 people with coffee growing cold in their hands and nowhere particularly dramatic to be. Emma looked ahead at the evening traffic, the wet pavement reflecting the city lights, and thought about how strange healing was. For a long time, she had believed she would know she was finally over Ryan when she could stand in front of him without hurting. But that had never been the real measure. Healing had begun when she no longer needed him to see that she was happy, when Madison's regret stopped being her responsibility, when Ryan's reaction stopped mattering, when love stopped feeling like something she had to win, defend, or prove. And maybe the bravest step wasn't always a kiss. Maybe sometimes it was much smaller than that. A hand you reached for once because you were afraid, and then reached for again, much later, on an ordinary Tuesday. Not because you needed saving, but because you were no longer afraid to choose.